Hey folks, it's Abby and today we're going to be going through my March wrap-up and my balancing of the books. Now I'm going to try and make this less painful than it was last time. It ended up being half an hour long, so I'm not going to talk as much about the books that I'm hauling. I'm going to do a big seasonal haul. So I'm just going to mention them and where I got the books from. And also I probably won't be talking as much about the books that I've read. I'll try and keep it to a minimum. I do put full reviews up on my blog. Let's delve in before this is even longer. To start off with balancing everything out of my favour straight away, Carrie sent me 3 books this month. That is Carrie from Caring for Books. Thank you so much, Carrie. One of the books that she sent me is Beowulf, translated by Maria Davana Headley, or Headley. I'm really excited to read this. It's actually on my April TBR. If you want to know a little bit more, this is a female translation of Beowulf, the first one. And then because I expressed an interest after a certain necklace that Illumicrate gave us, she gave me the duology of The Never Tilting World, which I'm really excited. So The Never Tilting World and The Ever Cruel Kingdom, both by Rin Chapeko. This is a world where half of the planet is in sunshine and half is in darkness because some shit was fucked up a while ago and these 2 women need to fix it. Balancing against me, but I'm very excited for all of them, and thank you so much again. And then before I get onto the actual books, I did read 3 magazines this month. I'm glad that I am finally getting through them. Now, books. American Gods by Neil Gaiman. This took me 15 days to get through. It is huge, it is massive, and I'm glad I read it. My partner loved it. A couple of my other bookish friends loved it. Olivia and Hannah hated it. I found it mediocre. Didn't love it, didn't hate it. It was fine. I think I'm giving this 3 stars. I guess a true mid-ground would be 2.5. I enjoyed the mythological aspects and I thought it was really interesting to see all of the different gods, but at the same time the character development was poor and there were parts where I didn't care, but then I was still reading it. So yeah, ta-da! And then to a 5-star read, which is Super Volcanoes by Robin George Andrews. This is a non-fiction that was gifted to me by my mother-in-law this past Christmas. It's so good. It's so good. It's so fun. It's so accessible. Lots of humour. Really accessible without talking down. Highly recommend this 5-star read. And it's pretty. Just a little bonus. Then Olivia Savannah from Olivia's Catastrophe. Got very excited because I read The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater and I liked it. I ended up giving this, I've not put it through core pile, but 4 stars. I love the character development in this. I love the interactions between the girl Blue and the 4 boys from their high school, the Raven Boys. It's so fun, it's so well written. I adore Gansey and Adam and Ronan and Noah. Bless Noah. Yeah, basically I'm joining in on the hype. For me, it's not a 5-star read, but for me it was worth the hype that I'd heard and I want to continue with the series. It was really good. Then, staying on the same topic of Olivia, she gifted me some books. So she was unhauling some books and she let me have a little peruse through and see if any of them were ones that I'd like to read. One of them was Mrs. Death by Selena Godden. One is Across the Wall by Garth Nix, some short stories in the serial series, The Old Kingdom. And one was the first 4 books in the Earthsea series by Ursula K. Le Guin. Then one that Hannah from Letter M is waiting to roast me for. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I enjoyed it. Now, I will say, from a literature point of view, from an academic point of view, even just from a critical point of view, this is not a good book. It's not a good work of literature. However, I was completely engrossed. I didn't want to put it down. I was enjoying reading it every day. I wanted to read it rather than do other things, and I enjoyed the story. So I liked it. I think I'm giving it 4 stars. I'm not 100% sure yet. The ending was utter shite. Utter shite. So not so keen on that one. I understand why people really don't like it. I understand every single flaw, and yet I still enjoyed it. I don't know. It's the first V.E. Schwab that I've enjoyed. Definitely enjoyed, so I'm not complaining. Then a book that I DNF'd, I've got 179 pages into 3 Sisters, 3 Queens by Philippa Gregory. I'm never going to pick this up again, and therefore I'm counting this as being read, balancing out my scales. This is a historical fiction about Margaret, Catherine and Mary. I think I got them right. The actual history is fascinating, but I could not be asked with how Philippa Gregory wrote these characters. For starters, it's only from one point of view, which I didn't expect from a book called 3 Sisters, 3 Queens. I expected to see from all 3 points of view. It's only from Margaret's. And whilst I understand Margaret's reactions and the way that she's been written, in a lot of them she's just a whiny child. Like, even once she hits like my age, she's just a whiny child. I just didn't care. I just didn't care about this fictionalisation of these characters. I flipped through the book and actually read some more bits further on just to learn a little bit more without going and just googling it about the history, which is fascinating. I plan to research it at some point because the history itself is fascinating, but this book just wasn't for me. If you can read it and enjoy it, you'll get a lot from it in terms of the historical content, but just be warned, it's one point of view, it's a whiny child, and yeah. I don't know, I just really wasn't enjoying it. I thought I was going to push through, but then Chris realised, my partner realised I wasn't enjoying it. And I'll push through a lot of books. So if he realises that I'm not enjoying a book, if I'm making it that obvious, I've got to stop. So yeah. This one's done. I'm probably going to unhaul it at some point, but for now it lives here. Then the wonderful Renee from Renee Reads gifted me Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first ever Sanderson book on my shelves. I am so excited. I wanted to read something by him for so long, and this, while it links in with his overarching universe, is a standalone, so it's something that I can kind of finish off and see like how I actually feel about his writing for a completed story. I'm really excited to read this. Thank you so much, Renee. Then next up I read I Am a Cat by Sasaki Natsume. This was a lot less cat than I expected. This was written in I think 1905, but sometime in the early 1900s, and is more a commentary on society in Japan at that point in time. Once I kind of accepted that and realised that there wasn't going to be as much about the cat in it as I was expecting, then I enjoyed it. Before that I wasn't enjoying it just because I was like, when are we going to focus more on the cat? You don't. Like, the cat is just like a gimmick essentially, and it is the precursor to other books where the cat is more prominent, but the cat is a gimmick in this one. Yeah, this was a really good read. I'm really glad I read it. It's going to have like a good basis for me on these more like standard modern day cat books. Then next up I read a fantasy book that I'm really surprised doesn't have more traction. I've never heard anyone speaking about it, and it's got like less than 1,000 reviews on Goodreads, and that is Smiler's Fair by Rebecca Levine, book 1 in the Hollow Gods series. I picked this up for like 25 pence in a charity shop like in 2016, and I finally read this. It's really good. It has a lot of mixtures of different cultures intertwined to create these various fantastical cultures across the world that this book is set in. And then on top of that, it's got LGBTQ+ rep, it's got some really fantastic animal creatures inside. I adore kind of how everything intertwines and the threads all wrap up. I'm definitely continuing with the series. It's definitely adult. It's not YA, it's definitely adult. But this is great. This was so good, and I'm mad at myself a little bit for taking so long to read it, but I'm also mad that it's not more loved, because this came out years ago, half a decade ago, and it's so good. Like, honestly, if you enjoy adult fantasy, I really recommend giving this one a go. Then from a series that I started to one that I finished, and that is Cathy's Ring, written by Stuart Wiseman and Brigg. This is a multimedia with lots of doodles series, which is very contemporary. However, the big twist is a supernatural one of immortal beings. This is also set a while ago. They've got flip phones, but it's also really good. It's really good. I love this. I am both really happy with how it wrapped up and how it ended, but also mad that I don't get more of the characters. I think it was just written so well, which I didn't expect. I thought that this was just going to be like, because I bought this years ago in like 2012, so I thought it was like, okay, I should have read it at the time, I would have enjoyed it at the time, it's fine. But no, like, I'm giving this like 4 stars. It was really good. I wish I was reading more from it, and I think anyone like in that age bracket, if they can get over the fact that they're not going to have smartphones, that the latest tech is all going to be, you know, 10 years old, it's a really good book. And I love the multimedia aspects of the doodles throughout, because they actually have meaning and link in to stuff in the text, and it's on every single page. There's something meaningful in it. I think it's done really well. Then next up, I read Mrs. Death. So that's one of the 7, balanced, which is good. This book is about someone called Wolf. I've heard some people referring to them as male, but I've not seen any gender mentioned in the book other than them being unsure of their gender. So I'm going to use they them pronouns for Wolf. And they are being possessed by Mrs. Death, and they are writing down Mrs. Death's story whilst also confronting the death that they've experienced throughout their lives. And it also has some really brilliant points about death, but at the same time it felt unfinished. It felt like it could have done with another pass or 2 or 3 of editing. I do want to reread this. There is a chance that it's me, so I do want to read this at some point in the future, whether that's next year or later this year. So far it's like a 2.53 with potential to go up or down depending on what happens on the reread. Then a book that I got in February, didn't mention in the last balancing, and then read in March is the Illumicrate book, because it hadn't arrived when I was doing balancing. This is A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. It is a Scottish fantasy written by an American author. I was prepared for it to be awful. It's not. Now, grain of salt, this is set on the islands in the north of Scotland. I am British. I'm half Scottish, half English, but I've only lived in England and other countries, but never lived in Scotland. And on top of that, my Scottish heritage is southern. My family's from the borders, from Dumfries and Galloway. All of that said, there could be things in here that I am most likely missing that are not great representation. However, usually when an American writes about a culture that isn't their own, anyone can see that it's bad. This actually seems really good. Like, again, I'm sure that I've missed things that aren't quite right, but Rebecca Ross actually did research. She kind of mentions the books that she used. I think there was 4 different books that she used for research in the back of here that were specific to Scottish islands. So she's done the research into it. She's not just kind of been like, I don't even think she's part Scottish somewhere down the line, so she's not done that thing where she's been like, I'm an 18th Scottish and ran with that. It looks like she's actually done the work. And as a fantasy, it's really enjoyable. I do think there were some issues with the ending. Didn't like how they set up for the last book in the duology. It was very obvious. I'm still going to read it because I really want to know more about this world and about kind of how things develop, but I think that could have been neatened up and tightened a little better just so it wasn't so glaringly obvious that it was just setting up for the next book. And then also, we follow a young man, I suppose, he's probably like my age, maybe a little older, I'm 25, who left the islands at 11, went to university to study as a bard, learn how to play the harp, and then comes back to the island. And then obviously like re-meets people from his childhood. And the discrepancy between how the relationships are portrayed in like flashbacks, looking at their childhood versus now, doesn't quite match up. It doesn't quite seem right. There's like things that aren't addressed. Nothing major, like nothing big at all, but just like little niggling things where it's not perfect. So that's why this is only getting a 4 stars, but at the same time, like, 1, it's goddamn stunning. Like, and it's got end page art and everything. That's the slip. It's got end page art and everything. But also I genuinely really enjoyed it, and I'm 100% picking up the second book. Then, speaking of Illumicrate, we had this month's come through, the one for March that we'll be reading in April, and that is Gallant by V.E. Schwab. I do have an Illumicrate unboxing, if you want to see that in more detail. But yes, that arrived. I'm looking forward to reading it. Then I read The Guest Cat by Takashi Hirade. I'm so sorry. This is another one of the cat books. This is the next one chronologically in publishing order, and it's also so short, so I thought why not delve in and give it a little go. And I loved it. This is exactly what I had expected and wanted from I Am a Cat. It is so cute, so sweet. I love kind of the exploration of coming to love a wild thing that doesn't belong to you but has such an important place in your heart, and kind of respecting and loving nature. It's beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's so small, so easy to read, and I think that this is just absolutely stunning. I highly, highly recommend this. It's just absolutely beautiful. Then I've just remembered that American Gods isn't the first book I read. The first book I read was Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. I forgot about that because I only have the digital edition. This was really good. I didn't expect to enjoy it quite so much. I like that on the audiobook there is a narrator for each girl. There's 2 girls, one in the Dominican Republic, one in New York. Their father dies on flight, I cannot remember the name of the flight, but it was a real flight that actually went down that was going from New York to the Dominican Republic. It was a big cause of grief for Dominican Americans and Dominicans that wasn't really covered as much by the media as it would have been if it had been a primarily white group of people on that flight. And it's really interesting to see their different lives and how they're both Dominican but in different ways, and also seeing basically they have the same dad but he's holding two separate families and lying to the other family. They don't know that they exist. It's very, very interesting, beautifully written as always. Acevedo is a gorgeous writer. She reads one of the parts and a different voice actress reads another one. I really recommend listening to any of the audiobooks for Acevedo because I've listened to the Poet X as well, absolutely beautiful. So I actually really enjoyed this. And I was reminded by that by Champion, because I listened to this one. So this is the third book in the Legend series by Marie-Lou. Basically it's like a standard YA dystopian where like poor boy is like, oh, it's not so bad, I can actually make a difference, and rich girl is like, oh wow, it's a lot worse than I thought it was, and they fight to fix things. I enjoyed this more than I thought I would. I don't agree with this saying that it blows off the socks of the Hunger Games, and I think I would have enjoyed it more if I'd read it as a teen, but it does still have some good points. I do like how there's two sides in this regime world. One of them is the one that we live in, that we see as bad, the Republic, and it's very controlling. And lots of people are in poverty, kind of like the whole like communism viewpoint when it doesn't actually work, where like lots of people are really, really poor and then a few people are really rich. But then on the other side of that, they don't just have our world and it's perfect. They have heavy capitalism where everything is advertised, everything is controlled by corporations, and no one actually has any true freedom, but they portray it as being better than being in this republic. And I love how it's not perfect. It's not amazing. I don't know yet whether it's a 3 or 4 star. It's probably a 3.5, but I enjoyed it. And then we have my last book haul and my last book read. But the last book read doesn't count for the balancing. Neither did Clap When You Land, because one I didn't own and one is a reread. But this counts against me, which is The Embroidered Book by Kate Hartfield, and this is a historical fantasy set in 1768 following Mary Antoinette and her sister Charlotte, who is sent to Naples to marry a man she's never met, and it's fantasy because it says that when they were only children they discovered a book of spells that work with dark and unpredictable consequences, and it's about how power can have influence. And the reason I got this, and the reason it's in this shiny wrapping, is because I got it from Goldsborough Books. I have got their SFF box for the first time. This is my first one. So we have this really pretty cover with the kind of traditional edging. We have these gorgeous sprayed edges, and the end pages are just plain. However, under the dust jacket, it's so pretty. It's so pretty. So yes, I'm going to attempt to read this in April. I've not put it on my April TBR because I filmed my TBR before this arrived. It came on the 31st. And it's a big boy. It's like 700 pages. So I don't know if I'm going to manage it, but I want to try. I want these bookbox books to not live on my TBR forever. So yes, I'm going to try and read this one, and I hope that I really enjoy it because it sounds really good. Like women casting powerful spells, linking in a well-known and half-hated but half-loved historical figure. Yes, 100% here for this. And then yes, the last book that I read is Dead or Alive by Derek Landy, the 14th book in the Skullduggery Pleasant series. A reread for me. These tabs are from the first time I read it through last year. This came out on the 1st of April 2021. I think I read it on the 1st of April 2021. Because Until the End is coming out on the 14th of April 2022, and you can bet your ass I'm reading it then. So this was a lot of fun to reread. This one's wild, like it's absolutely ridiculous, and whether this is any good is really gonna... This will either be really good or awful depending on the last book, because it sets up a lot for the final book. There's so much in here that you would just never expect and that I can't tell you because of spoilers, but it was a lot of fun to reread. Obviously it was like the most recent Skullduggery that I read like for the first time recently, and so it was nice to kind of go back to that. And yes, I am so excited for Until the End. And apart from Clap When You Land, which I don't own, those are the books that I read this month, which was quite a few. So if I go and grab my stats, I wrote it down. I ended up reading 14 books in total. Only 12 of those come off of my TBR because Dead or Alive was a reread and Clap When You Land I don't own. 10 books onto my TBR. Which is a lot. So I had the 3 from Carrie, I had the 1 from Renee, I had 3 from Olivia, and then I had a River Enchanted because I wasn't able to put that in last month, and then Illumicrate for this month, Gallant, and then the SFF Goldsboro box. 10 books, which means it goes down by 2. Yeah! Last month I had to unhaul books, so I'm really fucking pleased that it went down. So yeah, I am now down to 118 books on my TBR. I don't even know how or why it's so big. But yes, I'm down to 118 books on my TBR, which is a lot. And also, this month is my second best so far in the year for how many I've read, reading 14. I read 15 last month. And I think that's roughly kind of like the highest that I read last year. But this month is the best out of 2022 so far, and the entirety of 2021 for how many pages I read in one month. I read 5,373 pages. What the fuck? The highest I've got in the past year and a few months has been like 4,500. How have I managed this? I don't know, but I'm not complaining. So yes, I've tried to make this as short and sweet as possible. I'm so sorry that these are so long. I really need to kind of figure out how to make these shorter. Thank you so much for watching, folks. I have 2 things for you to leave down in the comments below. One is your actually, do I have 3 things? I do, I'm so sorry. So, 1, your favourite book of this month or favourite books. 2, if you've read any of these or you thought of them. And 3, this is my first thing that I filmed in front of my newly organised, not quite fully organised, but getting there, shelves. Do you want a shelf tour? Let me know. If you want to see how I do for my reading in April and how badly I end up with the book balancing at the end of that month, then please hit subscribe down below and you can see some more of my videos. If you enjoyed the video, please do hit like, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye!